All right, so this morning we will have this first in a series in the City of Faith for young professionals to prepare yourself for the working world and to understand some of the dynamics. It's not just about getting, A's or B's or whatever, getting, good grades. You're going into an environment that is polluted. It's, filled with elements that are seeking to destroy your faith. And in order for you to combat this, you need to find out what God is saying and do it and lay aside every weight and run. Do you know what is the weight of Christian sonship? Or, as we are adopted into the faith by grace? And do you know what are the those spirits that lie behind lawlessness that you see happening all over the world? It's happening in politics. It's happening in media. It's happening in every sphere of governance, corruption, at the highest levels, all kinds of friction and rancor and resentment and infighting and politicking and backstabbing. Do you know where all this comes from? There is a spirit of lawlessness, and that spirit that resists and opposes the Spirit of God that dwells in you. So today we have a special speaker, Cherissa Nachiappan, and she first presented this package 5 years ago to a group of pastors right here in our Geylang campus for modalities, but now we see it fit that she should produce this on a wider basis and with updated information since 5 years ago, because a lot of things have happened since 5 years ago. In fact, a lot of things have happened since 5 months ago, right? So we need to constantly upgrade and improve. And if you know of some good, solid speakers who are willing to invest into the young people of tomorrow, really, you are the stakeholders of our future. So this series will be called the Stakeholders of Our Future series, all right? And Cherissa will be the first to go on this. It's a 2-hour program, but you can come in, jump out anytime you like. It's going to be recorded. Catch it on the replay and send this recording, this link, to your youth leaders, the presidents of youth clubs or groups, as a resource. And we also have, you can write into Mods TV, you can write into my wife. We'll give you the information on the chat box later. If you want to present this presentation to your youth group, if you think you understand everything and you're able to transmit the same material, we would be glad to send you the soft copy of this program. Okay, so since it is recorded, if you would like to remain on the recording, we will definitely be using perhaps incidental shots of you when the camera moves here and there. Your face would be used. I hope you'll give us permission to use this recording to advance the kingdom of God in hearts and minds of the young people. All right, so there's the email address that you need to write to, lian.so@gmail.com, and then we've given you the link there. So what you can do is open up a screen if you have the capacity. If you're on a mobile phone, that's not such a great idea, but if you're on a laptop, you can open up your personal feeds and you can just drop that link into your account, and you can share it, create a watch party, especially tag in your youth leaders, those 20-somethings, I think would understand English-based or even undergraduates would benefit from something like this. This is really to reflect on what is the zeitgeist, as the Germans say. What is the spirit of the times? What are we facing? Who's the enemy here? Because otherwise we don't know where we're shooting for, and we're just, fighting skirmishes instead of understanding what the real issues are that are facing the young people. Okay, so we'll We'll repeat this program maybe once or twice a year with different types of speakers and so on and so forth. But really important for you to catch this, open up your heart and minds, because you're going to have a great, informative, entertaining, and truly substantial, meaty session today. Okay? So, Cherissa, you want to introduce yourself and also your material? Go ahead.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Cherissa. I'm a friend of Pastor G's daughter actually. Yeah, we are university mates. And the reason why I'm sharing on humanism and the spirit of idolatry is because this is something that I think a lot of us have encountered, especially at university level. It's something that we have identified over years of after some study, we have identified that this is the root philosophy of what is going on in the world, a lot of what's going on in the world today, especially in the secular sense. Yeah, in the 20th century, I think the biggest invention is secularity. And what I want to point out in my presentation today is that secularism is not just it's not neutrality. You know, it's not neutral. It is actually a form of idolatry, just like any other religion. Yeah. So today we are going to uncover its tenets and what it means, and hopefully it will help you. And especially in engaging your youth, I feel like the youth struggle with this because it's it's become it's become uh, it's become culturally cool and acceptable to be in this religion, you know, without even realizing it. Yeah. So okay, that is a little bit on why humanism. So this is my roadmap. Why humanism and the modern manifestations of humanism, and where do we stand and what can we do about it. So as you can see, this little button here says good without God. That is the essence of humanism, right? So I don't know if you have talked to people, whether you're youth or even older people on humanism, and people have said these things, you know, oh, society has grown out of religion, you know, we are a progressive society. You know, religion is backward, it's superstitious, and now we are in an age of science and reason. And other more cultural things is YOLO. You know, I'm sure everybody has seen this somewhere on social media. YOLO, you only live once, just be true to yourself, know your own truth, follow your own heart. Um, Other statements that reek of humanism include, you know, all truth is relative. You know, you believe your truth, I believe my truth. You know, and Christians shouldn't impose their morality on other people. And other statements, doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're a good person. You know, so it doesn't matter whether you are Buddhist or you are Taoist or you are Shinto or you're Christian. You know, we're all the same. Everything is the same. As long as you're a good person, it's fine. Right. So these are all I would say, some tenets, some things that people who are seduced by humanist ideology would say. So what is the root underpinning of all this? Okay, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. You know, for us, we are familiar with the 10 Commandments, but this is the commandment of the humanists, right? Do whatever you want, and that is a law unto itself. Okay, so we will unpack this as we go on. So humanism has two main arms. The first arm is that they reject God and his laws, right? It's not so obvious now, but later on I will show you some laws of God that is being rejected in our culture currently today. For example, his marriage laws, his laws on sex and gender, his laws on what is good, what is bad. Yeah, so you commit, the short word for it is deicide, which basically just means you kill God, right? And in place, so once you have removed God from the authority figure in your life, what you do is you elevate yourself, mankind into it, right? So self-deification. So it's a twofold process. In how does someone lose their faith, or how does someone um, worship another god? This is how, right? You remove the existing authority in your life, and then you install yourself as the authority. What does this lead to? It leads to lawlessness, and it leads to rebellion. In 1 Samuel 15:23, says that rebellion is like the sin of divination, which is witchcraft, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. So a lot of elevation of men. It's also an arrogant. It's also very, very arrogant. So I don't know if you've interacted with people who are humanists. They are very arrogant. They are very disdainful towards religious people and their views. And yeah, so this is the process that they have gone through, right? So just want to give you some definitions of humanism to make it more concrete. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary says that it's a doctrine or a way of life centered on human interests that rejects supernaturalism and stresses on individuals' dignity and worth and capacity for self-realization through reason. So humanism is very much a product of the Enlightenment period in Europe, which emphasized, so Europe used to be very supernatural and very superstitious, but then when the Industrial Revolution and everything came, people decided that, you know what, I reject this idea of gods and God. It's arbitrary, it is unhelpful, it's a use for oppression of the people. So now I want to realize myself through my capacity to reason. Right? So reasoning and reasoning powers became the most became the god, became their god, right, of that age. So they say that everybody has dignity and worth, but who grants humans this dignity and worth? They don't say. They say, oh, it's intrinsic, it's in us, and that's why we can do whatever we want. So it's so if humans can through reason, you know, um, save themselves, become better people, become more moral, then they don't need a savior, right? Deals with the question of redemption and salvation. Basically, it says we do not need redemption and salvation as long as you teach me through education and um, through time and education, I can save myself. That's what they're saying, right? Okay, the next slide. Um, Oxford Companion to Philosophy. An appeal to reason in contrast to revelation of religious authority as a means of finding out about the natural world and the destiny of man, and also a grounding for morality. So this is what I've said before. Humanist ethics is also distinguished by placing the end of moral action in the welfare of humanity rather than fulfilling the will of God. Okay, so I just want to point out, right, that it's not just secular people that are captured by humanism, right? Humanism is alive and well in the church, right? And there are many youths that I like to call, social justice warriors. They feel that doing social action to improve the welfare of humanity is 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 the be all and the end all, right? It is more important than fulfilling the will of God. So if God tells you to, say be a university professor, a person would say, no, I want to do social work. I want to be a missionary. So that's the kind of thinking, it's a form of liberal theology. So it's actually the same. It's actually humanism, but it's cloaked with Christian language, right? So this is Christian humanism. I hope this is not prevalent amongst your youth, but I have a feeling that it is. Very, very common nowadays. Okay. humanism manifests in many, many different branches of knowledge, but in philosophy, when we talk about ethics, right? So previously, before this Enlightenment period, and also people who are schooled in religious thought, we know that there's an objective morality in society, right? There is one person who is God who says what is right and what is wrong, and everything flows from that. But because the humanists reject that, so they say that, the world is morally relative now. You know, you may believe something is right, I may believe something is right, and we're both right, right? So it's a bit ridiculous. It can be very ridiculous. So I remember watching Ravi Zacharias, who just passed away. He is a Christian apologist. Basically, he was talking to a person about moral relativism, and he said, and suddenly he just, he took his fist and he wanted to punch the guy in the face. And the guy, he was like taken aback. He was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Well, I believe that it is my right to punch your face." So, so you can see how ridiculous it is. How can it be that someone who whatever you believe is right, you can live according to it. Even if it affects someone else negatively, right? So that is the essence of moral relativism. And as it plays out in politics, you can see evidence of this everywhere today, right? It manifests in radical liberalism and secular fundamentalism. What do these things mean? Radical liberalism is basically, just now I showed the red words, "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." They believe that you cannot stop or you cannot interfere with anything that they do. The government should not interfere in anything, right, that people do. That's what they say. But yet, on the other hand, they want government to come down on people who disagree with them, right? So they will say that, oh, the government should not be involved in women's choices on whether or not they should have their children. But they also want the government to legalize abortion. They want state taxpayers' money to fund abortion clinics. So they actually they are always contradictory, right? So this we'll explore this later as well. Secular fundamentalism is basically just people who are radically anti-religious, right? You can, if in parliament your minister says something like, I think we, if your minister says something in response to another, say, Christian minister or a religious minister, and says like, "I'm sorry, but I think your views are not valid because they are from a religious standpoint," that is someone who is secular and also fundamentalist. They reject all viewpoints that stem from a religious mind, even if the person is not appealing to any religious text or authority when they make their arguments. Basically, they are just tackling the person because the person is religious. Therefore, everything and anything he says cannot be accepted, right? So, what happens when people imbibe, what happens when people embrace humanism as a religion? It leads to lawlessness. Sorry. Okay. So, what are the spiritual origins of humanism? Just now I mentioned that it started with the Enlightenment, but no, it started way before that, right? The first humanist in history, who was that? Right? You can see him on the tree in this picture. That is the serpent, right? So I'll go through these three scriptures to just flesh this out. Genesis 3:5. Okay, so look at what the serpent says. You will not, this is when he's trying to convince Eve to take the fruit, right? From the tree of life. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So the first humanist in society in our human history is the serpent telling a human being that if you do this, you can be like God, right? And see what he says immediately after that, knowing good and evil. So this is exactly what we've been talking about just now. basically you will be able to understand all of what is good and what is evil, right? Without the need for God. And he says, it's your eyes will be open as if God is trying to hide something from you. So you can see there's a lot of questioning and slander against God, but it's all hidden, it's all subtle. And Satan, why does Satan say this? Right? Why does he tell the woman this? Is he really trying to help the woman? No. Satan knows that the moment you move away from God being the moral arbiter of all good and evil, you immediately shift towards worship of him. Right? So there's no in between. It's really only two. There's only God and it's the evil one. So if the evil one tells you, oh, you will, why not you be like God? What he's really saying is worship me. Okay? And this is very clear in Isaiah 14, 13 to 15. Look at what he says. This is the passage on the serpent being thrown down from heaven, right? Because of his arrogance, because of his rebellion against God. So he says, you said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on a mount of assembly on the utmost heights of Mount Zephon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. So again, you can see that just now he was telling Eve, you will be like God. But the reality is that he himself wants to be God. Okay, so this is the spirit behind humanism. Right, and in Thessalonians, the writer was telling people, telling the church, don't be deceived, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs. So rebellion is very much in our future, in the last days, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. I think this is the Antichrist. Pastor G, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. And the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped. Right? So humanism is relevant not just for culture wars, but it's also for our future, right? Our eschatology in the last days. The man of lawlessness will oppose and exalt himself over everything that is called God, i.e., everything that is religious or is worshipped, right? So that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Right? So this is the spirit as well of the Antichrist, right? So the reason why it's the spirit of the age now, is what Pastor Jerry said just now, because the Antichrist is coming, right? And the Antichrist cannot just come into like a Christian culture. He will be rejected immediately. The culture needs to be primed to accept someone like that, right? So that's why it's manifesting in culture today. Okay, so in human history, humanism has had roots in Greek philosophy, right? If you can see there, I put down a quote from Protagoras, who was a Greek philosopher. He says, man is a measure of all things, right? So obviously, this is where it came from. As I've mentioned already, it idolizes reason and rationality, which is all in the mind, which is why the Bible says, worship the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? We have to educate ourselves as well in our minds in order to worship God. Okay, and it's anti-religion religion. It expresses itself politically through liberalism. Okay, so right now I will go through the biblical history in Daniel, and we will explain why Greek philosophy is relevant to us today. Okay, if you look at the dream that Daniel had, right? He had this statue, and its head was of gold, its chest and its torso was of silver, its groin area was bronze, and its legs of iron, and then toes were iron and clay. Right? I just want to zoom in on the belly and thighs of bronze. You can see here that it corresponds with the Greek Empire. Many people, I mean, it's well accepted that this is just a very short overview of history, right? And the different empires that came after Daniel's time. And for the Greek Empire, I just want you to note that this part, right, contains the reproductive organs of the statue. Why is that important? Because Greek philosophy and Greek culture, right, even though they were overtaken by the Romans politically, their culture pervaded the Roman Empire. The Romans loved Greek culture, so they still very much adhered to it, right? So even though the empire fell, their culture and influence still remained, right? It remained through the Romans. So the Romans have their own pantheon of gods. The Greek have their own pantheon of gods, but actually they're the same, just with different names, right? So, and after the Roman Empire, you can see it's to our current age and to the end times, and we still embrace Greek culture, right? I will show you in some photos later on, and also in this next slide. What are the manifestations of a Greek culture? First, they idolize the human mind. So everybody knows that, Aristotle and all these other Protagoras, as I mentioned just now, all these thinkers, all Greeks loved um, um, people who are intelligent, right? They love wisdom. In the Bible, it says the Jews search for a sign, and the Greeks search for wisdom, right? So wisdom is their god. Okay, so in Greek culture, homosexual relationships were seen as higher and more ideal as opposed to marriage relationships. I just want to point out that they never legalized homosexual relationships. It was always a side thing. A lot of their kings had a side lover, even though they remained married to women. They knew that they needed women for children, so they would do that. But having a homosexual relationship is it's like a, it's a class thing. It's superior, and disbelief in absolute truth. So they did not believe that there was one truth, which is why they love to philosophize, and think about truth. Protagoras, I've mentioned. Romans conquered Greece but adopted Greek culture, I've mentioned, and it's the basis of modern day Western civilization. So let's look at some photos of modern day Greece. I was there a couple of years ago. So more than a couple of years ago, it must have been before this first presentation. So look, if you can see, this square is called Aristotle Square, right? And do you find this arrangement very familiar? I think for those in Singapore, you will know that a lot of our colonial buildings are built with this square. There's a city square in the middle with buildings around the side. So this is very much a Greek societal thing, right? And if you look, so in the Greek culture, right, because they loved wisdom so much, they would have these squares, and they would have these places where people would just gather to hear people talk about philosophy and about morality, right? So this is very much like and so democracy is actually a Greek idea, right? It involves people sitting around and debating in parliament. Yeah, so this is all from the Greek culture. Gymnasiums, theaters, forums, all these are Greek concepts, right? Look at this theater, Greek theater. It's the same, right, as any of one of our stadiums today, right? It's the same concept of an audience and then the stadium in the middle, and modern theaters still built like this. This is a picture of Mars Hill, where our beloved Paul was arguing with the Greek philosophers in his time. So Hippocrates was also a Greek philosopher. I took this in a souvenir shop. Medicine is of all the arts the most noble, right? So this is just a notebook, but all of you know, right? Modern doctors, they have to swear on what? Before they become a doctor, they swear on a Hippocratic oath. Who is Hippocrates? It's this guy, right? It's this Greek philosopher. So modern medicine is also based on Greek philosophy. I just want you to look at this. This is in Rome, all right? This is no longer in Greece, this is in Rome. But just look at the size of this thing, right? So one other aspect of humanism is that they love to erect things that are huge, that are human, but they are huge. So it's a magnification of humans literally, right? Or of their gods literally, right? And their gods take human form, right? So just look at the size. I don't know if you can see the size of the people next to these statues. They are tiny, and it's the statue is 10 times, the size of people, right? So this is the Roman structures that were based on Greek philosophy as well. They just wanted to overwhelm you. And of course, this is the Colosseum. Again, it's also structured in the same manner as the theaters. This is the Vatican City. Again, huge. And for those of you in Singapore as well, you would recognize this structure. So the dome, the idea of a dome and then a standing structure amidst a big square, this is also a Greek thing, right? This is also a Greek architecture or Greek civilization planning, right? And it does not have great it's the meaning is a bit more insidious. It's a bit dark. Basically, the straight thing is supposed to be a phallic symbol, and the dome is supposed to be the thing that the phallic symbol goes into. So this is how Greek society organized itself. And if you look even in the Catholic Church, their temples. Oh, oops. The Vatican City cathedrals. This is supposedly a statue to honor Peter, right? Because they I'm sure you guys know better than I do that the Catholic Church sees Peter as the founder of the church. And I'm sorry, but this looks like a temple to me, right? It's just not. It's not in any way look like it will honor God. Okay. So more historical origins. I think I've mentioned some of these things already. So I just want to point out that although the humanism began during the Enlightenment period, and they based themselves on science, a lot of the first and most impactful scientific explorations during the Renaissance period, which is the period before the Enlightenment, were made by Christians, right? So, for example, Galileo was the one who, I think he was the one who first mapped out the stars or something like that. Yeah, and basically what he would do, because the Christians, why were the Christians at the forefront of scientific explorations? Because they believed that God was a creator God. So he has a method and a pattern in history that is for us to look for, right? For us to discover. So that's why apparently it's said that when he looks into a telescope, he would put on his robes because he felt like he was in the midst of something majestic, right? He was in the midst of God's creation and he wanted to honor God. And of course, our favorite Isaac Newton was also a believer, and therefore he discovered many things, including gravity. So how do you then? So scientists today detach this logic from God, right? And they use it as an argument against him, right? Now science, the philosophy undergirding even science has already changed, right? It's no longer about exploring the world that God gave us, but it's about a way to better ourselves as human beings. So this change in philosophy you can see, right? This is in the Vatican. All right, in this huge room, on one side of the wall, there is this Raphael School of Athens. And you can see in this picture that Aristotle and Plato are in the same room, right? This painting was supposed to be an idealization of the dream team of human knowledge, right? The two smartest philosophers in the same room, right? And on the opposite side of this wall in this room, which I didn't take a picture of, is the traditional painting of, the three-tier traditional paintings where you have God in heaven, and then you have Jesus on earth, and then you have hell or whatever. The three-tier paintings, so that represented divine knowledge. So now they are separated. right? Human knowledge and divine knowledge now are separated. This dualism is very much a Greek thing as well. Okay, and in the Sistine Chapel, you can see that when Michelangelo painted this for the first time in history, man was represented as the same size as God, right? I think you can see nearer to the right hand side, right? That's Adam, it's supposed to be Adam, and pointing his hand out towards God, right? So for the first time in history, right, they are now the same size. Previously, the God was always presented as something bigger and different from humans, right? This is the first time that this has happened, right? And this is a wall of the final judgment where you can see a bits of Roman mythology all over. I'm not going to go into it, but it's very mixed, right? So it's theology and Roman mythology mixed in together, right? What does the Bible say about humanism? So now we know that it's a Greek thing, and in Zechariah, in Zechariah, the Bible says, "I will raise up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece." Right? So in the last days, right, it's not going to be a war on race, on culture. It's going to be on mindset, right? It's on those who think with the Torah, right? Like those of the Jews who view the law of God as their law, and those who view Greek philosophy as their God. So it's in the last days, this is going to be the dichotomy, and you can already see it playing out today, right? So these are the two different paths. In 1 John 2:16, it says that for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. So we know that Greek thinking and Greek philosophy and humanism all comes from not from the Father, but from the world, right? Okay, so just to break it down a little bit more, um, when we talk about humanism, what exactly do we mean in terms of how we live our life, right? I want you to see here in these two tables how different, right? Someone who views God and the Torah as their guide for life, and someone who views humanism as their guide for life, right? So idolatry of the flesh, what does that mean? In Philippians 3, the Bible actually says, "For many walk of whom often I told you, now tell you even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose God is their appetite, right? And whose glory is in their shame, who set their minds on earthly things." This is Philippians 3:18-19. So people who are humanists, who don't have any God, who say they don't have any God, they idolize. What do they idolize? They idolize their flesh, right? So their God is their appetite. So whatever they want, they fulfill, right? If they're hungry, they eat. They like the food, they eat. They want to have sex, they have sex, right? They wanna sleep, they sleep. So there's nobody can tell them what they want to do, because that's their God, their appetite, right? Idolatry of the mind. This one we have talked about already. They don't believe in religious revelation. They believe everything can be done through reason and study. They don't like things like being closed-minded. They're very big on being open-minded. But yet, what does God say? God says in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 20, "Where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world?" Right? So God clearly doesn't think much about the wisdom of the world. Okay, He has made foolish all this. So if you feel overwhelmed, pray. God will give you wisdom. Right? That's James as well. Okay, that's in James. Okay, another verse for you, Romans 1:21-25. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give him thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible men and of birds and of four-footed animals and crawling creatures. So this passage was in Romans 1 is talking about the degeneration of men, right? So it's very interesting that when people degenerate into idolatry, what happens first is they knew God, but they don't honor him, they don't thank him, they become futile in their speculations, and then their foolish heart was darkened. Right? So idolatry is very much a spiritual thing. Apostasy is also a spiritual thing. It's a slide from worshiping God to worshiping Satan. Right? Idolatry of the soul. Okay, idolatry of the soul or the self. Um, this is where they feel that self-expression and freedom of choice is the most important thing. I think this is a very Western thing, but in the US and in Western countries, and it's coming over to Singapore as well, a lot of people are very big on these two concepts: freedom of choice and consent. These are the only two laws that they will allow anyone to share and live by. You must give me my freedom to choose whoever I want to sleep with, whatever I want to do with my body, even if it's someone else's body. You know, I must be able to choose and consent. As long as I and the other person consent, you cannot fault us for doing anything, right? So these are the two main arguments that are being that manifest today. Compare this to God's way, right? God's way is totally opposite, right? It tells us to crucify ourselves, deny ourselves, right? It tells us to love God and renew our minds. You know, renewing our minds is not really just a matter of studying, right? It's also a matter of aligning our minds and our thoughts to what God believes is true and what God says is true and is right, right? Idolatry of the heart, you know, the Bible says the heart is deceitful. Who can stand it, right? Who can bear it? And we must sometimes our hearts also tell us wrong things, right? We can't trust our hearts or our emotions all the time. So we have to love God with all of our heart, right? We have to also align our emotions, you know, with Him, right? And idolatry of the self, we are not here to fulfill all of our desires, right? We are bought with a price. We are bought with the blood of the Lamb, and we are here to do the will of God. So you can see it's totally opposite, right? Completely opposite. And one way leads to death, one way leads to life, right? As you can see in my Proverbs verse there. So this is what the verse I mentioned just now. 1 Corinthians 1:22-24, the Jews demand a sign, Greeks look for wisdom, right? But we preach Christ crucified. Right, so that is the difference, right? I just want to point out that even just because someone is a Jew doesn't mean that they worship God. All right, Jews in their history, they have also been Hellenized. They've also been Hellenization. Basically, just means they took on Greek philosophy into their culture, right? So just want to point that out. And also, not all Jews believe in Jesus. Yeah, so we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. So I want to concentrate today on the Gentiles part, right? So if you stand up for Christ, for God in this culture today, right, you will be called a fool. Yeah, most likely by the people around you. All right, but take heart, because God has already said that, you know, Paul has already warned us. He has told us, you know, but to verse 24, but to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. So God promises His wisdom, which is higher than the world's wisdom, right? And it's up to us whether we want that wisdom or not, right? And Colossians 2:8, it says, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. So there are many these hollow and deceptive philosophies. So today, of course, we're only talking about one. But you can see that Paul also said, right, that these philosophies come from the earth, they come from spiritual forces in this world, they do not come from Christ, right? Okay, so now I just want to go through some very common um, cultural uh, arguments which come from straight from the humanist philosophy and contrast that, right, with what we believe as Christians. Okay, so hopefully this will help you navigate your culture, navigate what's happening in this world, right? Okay, so you can first you can enjoy this picture while I take a sip of water.
Also, just to remind our listeners to write down your questions in the chat box, and also give comments on your situation if you're dialing in from outside of Singapore. We are also very honored this morning to be hosting Reverend Dr. Raul Buai from who's a spiritual father and a father of Pentecost in the nation of Burma in Myanmar. He's also president of the Evangelical Fellowship of Myanmar, as well as he is the leader of so many churches, over 230 pastors, 180 churches. That was my last count among the Chin, the tribals, and the people in the great nation of Burma, the developing nation of Burma, as well as many other those who are leading youth and youth groups. So if you do have questions, we also have churches represented from Visayas, Mindanao, as well as Luzon, Palawan. So if you do have questions, just put it down in the chat box. And Cherissa, also just to take note, your microphone is very, I think your computer is very sensitive. So we just have to avoid touching the area near your computer, because
Okay,
it is
got
picking
it.
up some sounds, ambient sounds there. Okay,
Sorry,
so great.
sorry.
Back to you, Cherissa.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize. Yeah, okay. Thank you and welcome to everybody who has just joined. We are now going to go through some cultural manifestations of the humanist philosophy and how it contrasts with what God teaches us, right, in the Bible. Okay, so one very fundamental scientific, so to speak, philosophy is evolution, right? They say that humankind evolved from fish in the sea, from and then we grew into monkeys, and then we became humans, right? So this picture just shows you, you know, so did we evolve from the trash that we threw into the sea? Then it's ridiculous. But anyway, so what do the evolutionists believe? They believe that the universe is self-existing. How it came into existence, they do not say. They believe that natural selection and adaptation resulted in the formation of man, because we are just the strongest species, right? The strongest species survives, so that's how we survive. And they believe in interspecies evolution. Interspecies evolution just means that you can transform from a fish to a monkey, basically. But this has never been proven in science, and they can only prove that fish can grow legs or whatever, but they have never ever been able to prove that one type of animal can transform over many years to another type of animal. No evidence of that so far. So they believe that Earth is millions of years old, and that mankind, as I said, evolved from bacteria to fish to reptiles to mammals and finally to human. And we are still going to evolve into better versions of ourselves. So I think now they want to incorporate things like technology and other transhumanist elements into human beings. They want to make us better. So this is their philosophy. Okay, so what is the worldview behind this? All right, so these are not scientific claims, right? Because as I said, they do not have science to back up what they are saying. This is a belief. This is a worldview. Okay, so what is their worldview? Think about it. If you are a man and someone tells you that, oh, you actually your ancestry is a bacteria, your ancestry is a fish, how does that make you feel? What does it make you feel? It makes you think like, okay, so there is no real reason why I'm here on this earth. I'm just a result of this process, right? That has happened over so many years, and all I have to do is to survive, right? And become better so that my descendants will survive, right? So there's no God, there's no purpose, there's no good and evil. So whatever I want to do, I just do because I need to survive. And whoever is in power will define good or evil. So if you want to define good or evil, you be in power, right? And there's no accountability because they do not think that there's judgment after this earth. They think you just disappear, and it's up to man to make his own meaning in life, or even to decide if there's any meaning at all. So if you don't think that there's meaning in life, then what you do, you commit suicide, right? So there's a big push to decriminalize suicide all over the world right now, because they feel that humans have full agency over their life. So if they feel that their life is not worth living, why should they not be able to take it, right? So that's one small little manifestation of how it manifests in criminal law. Mankind will advance through education, information, and technology. So, the more you read, the more you learn, the more data you gather, the more technology you employ, the better you will be, the more you will survive. Okay, so this is the mindset. What is the implication? As I mentioned, it's a devaluation of human life. So, a lot of people who believe in these sorts of this kind of thinking also feel that, as I mentioned, suicide is acceptable. Euthanasia, therefore, is also acceptable. Euthanasia is the someone who is in pain or has a terminal illness, and they want to prematurely end their life, right? So that's euthanasia. So there is a huge push around the world in many countries right now for doctors to be able to administer drugs to kill their patients because their patients want it, right? So that's euthanasia for you. And of course, abortion, right? Abortion. So humans think that because being able to think and being a sentient human being is so important, is the essence of life. Then when someone is so small, it's just they call it a clump of cells, right? When someone is young and in the womb, yeah, it's not a human being, so we can just abort it, right? Because it's just a clump of cells. They can't think, it can't feel, it can't do anything, right? So that is the one of the reasons why they don't feel that there's anything wrong with these three things. What are other implications? Pursuit of individual happiness. These people, they feel that if they want to have sex or they want to have life partners with multiple people, they should be able to. If they want to have more than one person at the same time, they should be able to. If they want to have relationships with someone of the same sex, they should be able to have that, right? Why? Because it's just to pleasure myself. There's no good, or there's nothing higher than that. Non-sanctity of human biology, there's stem cell. So these people feel that in order to advance humankind, we need more knowledge, right? So we want to know how humans work, right? So we need to study them. So stem cell research is something that is being pushed as well around the world. Eugenics basically means you want to manipulate people's DNA and choose the stronger, better traits. So I don't know if you've heard of people or scientists pushing for people to be able to choose their children, traits of their children, whether they want blue eyes or black hair, or they want them to be genetically stronger or weaker in certain ways. This is all comes under eugenics and stem cell research, right? So this is because they don't see human beings as created by God, as something, special, something sacred almost. It's just up for study, right? And the weak and the disabled and the unintelligent will be phased out, right? So I just want to share a story in one of my university classes. So the teacher, it's about biomedical law and ethics, right? I'm talking about people my age, so this was back then, 10 years ago, about 20 somethings. The teacher asked, if the scientists could come up with a method of being able to take out the gene or to remove or manipulate a gene that will prevent Down syndrome, right, from coming into play, would you support that, right? And I can tell you that Christians and non-Christians alike said that they would, right? Um, without, I think they, I mean, history, I don't know if you know, but during the Nazi reign, they did a lot of human experimentation, including these sorts of things, because I think you know that the Nazi ideology was that we want to create a superior race of mankind that will survive. So same kind of thinking, right? We want to dominate, we want to survive. So all the weak, basically Hitler killed a lot of disabled people and weak people, think people he viewed as weak. He didn't feel that they were worth much to society, so he killed them, right? So this is the thinking behind a lot of the very the worst leaders, I would say, of the last century, and it's coming back. So what does the Bible teach us? What is the creation view, right, of this earth? The earth was created in 6 days. We are created in the image of God. I think that is an extremely profound statement. Man's purpose is to worship God, and God's moral laws are objective and were given to protect and guard against sin, right? So the biblical narrative recognizes that man is fallible, right? It recognizes that man can sin, right? The idea of why we're on earth is not just to fulfill our own desires, but to fulfill the will of God. And God has redeemed us and enabled us to live holy lives, which is the will of God, right? So there is sin, there's redemption, and there's holiness. Very different. Okay, so I already mentioned a little bit about this just now, but just to dive a bit deeper into it, abortion is another big thing that we can see the clash in philosophy, right? It's another big thing around the world, especially in the developed countries. Um, why is it such a big issue, right? Why do people want to kill babies, right? Okay, so this is the thinking, right? Sex is first for enjoyment, and then it's for pleasure instead of procreation, right? So first once you take God out of the equation, there's no accountability for sin or anything. Pleasure becomes the most important norm. So women, and of course also there's this pseudo women's rights, radical feminism kind of thing, right? So kind of push in society. So they say that women should be able to choose whatever they want to do with their own body, right? So that's the narrative. But the thing is that a baby in her womb is not part of her body, it's someone else's body. The key is, do you see that baby as a human being or not, right? It's whether it's alive or not. Okay, so then the argument goes, when does life begin, right? There are many arguments that have been put out by the other side. First, they say, oh, when the fetus can feel pain in 14 days, or when the fetus is viable. Viable basically just means that if you take the baby out of the womb, it can live in certain conditions, it can live outside of the womb, right? Okay, this is a bit complicated, so I'm not going to go in. So this means, right, this means that in certain countries with better medical facilities, a baby can be viable earlier. So you will have a situation where a baby is considered a human being in one country and not a human being in another country on the basis of their medical technology, which is ridiculous, right? Okay, and another argument is, oh, life begins when the, or rather we won't be able to kill the cell once the cell can't split anymore, right? When twinning cannot occur, because how would you know, right? If the baby is one or it's two cells. Well, that's the argument. Okay, and then of course the the real reason is that the mother is not happy with having the child. So that is the reason why people want to abort, because the mother is either a single mother, or the mother was raped, or the mother was whatever it is, conceived in, the baby was conceived in less desirable circumstances, right? So if the mother is not happy with the child, then the baby's not a baby and we can abort it. So that's what they are trying to argue. Why? Because choice is more important than life, right? To them, having choice, having the freedom to choose is more important than choosing the right thing. Okay, having children is a liability, it's not a gift from God. And sex is more about enjoyment and pleasure than about having children. This stems from the satanic hatred of the seed of the woman in Genesis 3:13. If you go and read that passage, it says how, talks about how God will put enmity between Satan and the seed of a woman, right? So Satan hates hates whatever comes from a woman's womb, right? Um, and the rest of these things I have mentioned. The fetus is a blob of tissue that only becomes human at another stage. They have not decided which stage. Um, and of course, it's more important to facilitate IVF and embryonic stem cell research than to care about the lives of the fetuses. Why am I putting this here? Because many, I don't know if you know, but Planned Parenthood, which is the main abortion clinic and facility in the US, I think recently, a few years ago, they uncovered that these abortion clinics are actually selling fetal tissue to companies so that they can do research on the babies, right? So they will take all these body parts of the babies and they will sell them to pharmaceutical companies or whatever it is so that they can do stem cell research, right? So it's really horrendous. Okay, so what are the implications of such a thinking, right? The figures, they are not updated, but I think they are enough to tell you, to show you the magnitude of it, right? 11,000 abortions a year here in Singapore in that time frame. In the US, 53 million babies over a 40-year period, right? So it's really, in the previous generation, when we had the Holocaust and we had Pol Pot and all these people, they actually killed people who are alive, it was, and we call it a genocide, but no one is talking about the killing of these babies, right? Who and it's at such a scale, right? That's bigger than even what Hitler did, right? Um, yeah, abortion has become a profit-driven business right now. So in America right now, I think, if I'm not wrong, Trump was actually trying to defund Planned Parenthood. Can you imagine if your taxpayers' monies are given to Planned Parenthood, right, to subsidize abortions or to keep the abortion clinics running? So Trump is actually trying to defund them. Okay, so what is the godly way of thinking about abortion? So these things we all know, right? That we are made in his image, we are knit together in our mother's womb, fearfully and wonderfully made, we are called with him for a purpose, and our bodies are the temples of the Holy Spirit. Children are gifts from God, and we are bought with his blood, right? The difficulty I know is to translate all these things into a way that people can understand. Yeah, so if you do have questions on how we can talk to people about abortion without using the Bible, or yeah, you can ask a question. Yeah, it does take a bit of studying and a bit of effort, but it can be done, right?
I think also, Cherissa, that we may need to do a specialized module for pastors and pastors'
Mm.
kids and pastors' families, because most of the folks here, once you touch them, once you educate them, they can go ahead and educate the communities and the congregation and prepare them. So we can think about that as well, and rally your troops and who are the specialists in this area in the City of Faith, and so on and so forth. Get them involved, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're up for it, yeah, we could do something like that, a bit more specialized. I'm really just touching and going here.
Yeah, I think
Um,
probably yours is just going to lay out the curriculum, and then from there we could break it up into maybe 10 or 12 sessions and focus in on specific areas where we want to target. We want to target for prayer, for intercession, for the intercessors, as well as when you're going into certain areas in church planting, you need to know what are the prevailing spirits there, so that we're not fighting these little, small skirmishes, like, all these little battles instead of the main war effort. We really need to know what that war is. Go ahead.
yeah. So the next manifestation I'm going to talk about is about sexual sin and perversion, and of course the LGBT lobby that is happening all around the world right now. In fact, today in Singapore there is going to be a protest for the repealing of our law on criminalizing male male intercourse. Right, so this is happening all over the world, especially in the developed countries. So why is this happening? How does this link to humanism? Right, so a lot of these people who are pushing for increased liberalization of different expressions of sexuality, this is what they believe, right? That sex within marriage is restrictive. Sex between opposite members of the opposite sex is also restrictive. And they believe that there's no moral difference between the two, right? So between a husband and wife, having sex to procreate or for their couple enjoyment is the same as a homosexual couple or a homosexual orgy or whatever it is. They are morally equivalent, right? And why do they say that? Because morality is subjective, right? It changes with the times. So maybe last time it wasn't so acceptable because people were more traditional, but now the times have changed, and if you don't accept it, you are a bigot. Right, so that's their argument. And as long as, so this is the freedom of choice part I was talking about just now. And then this next point, which is two people who love each other should be able to have sex, that's the consent part. Right, so the argument goes, if I agree and if he agrees, why should this not be allowed? Right, because there's no higher norm outside of that. Right, I'm not harming him, he's not harming me, so let's just do it, you know. And people who, so this is another argument, right? They don't believe that people are born in the image of God, right? So they believe that, okay, um, they are born this way. They are born with homosexual tendencies that they have to act on. These are, it's like instinctual to them, and it's their identity. So you can't take that away from them, right? If you oppose this, or you don't think that they should be allowed to act on their desires, um, you are bigot, right? Whereas for Christians, we believe in redemption, right? We believe that certain brokenness in human beings come from sin, come from generational sin or personal sin, and we believe that God can redeem, right? Even if He doesn't heal us totally of deliver us totally from our evil desires, He will give us the power to act against it or beyond it, right? So another argument that they like to say is that, oh, you, the fundamental Christian, is oppressing me with your heteronormativity. What does that mean? It means that your insistence that the only normal thing is man and woman. That's the only normal relationship that people should have, right? And this is oppressive to me. That's what they say. Because you discriminate against me, you bully me, and just by existing, you are oppressing me. Just by believing that you are the only right thing is oppressive to me. Okay. Um. So I've already mentioned this just now. Okay, why am I talking specifically about this issue? I feel that this issue is a lot wider than what they claim it to be. So on the surface, it looks like, oh, just some poor thing people who can't really help themselves, and then they are really just pushing for society to be more open and accepting of their inclinations, right? But wrong. Okay, so let's look at how they have pushed. They are pushing a wider agenda worldwide on the basis of this sexuality thing, right? Politically, in many countries now, they call first for the decriminalization of laws against unnatural sex, right? Why? Okay, in the first place, why do we have laws against unnatural sex? Okay, other than this being first, it came from the Bible. I think a lot of us know, right? Leviticus 18 and things like that. Do not lie with a man as you lie with a woman. It's an abomination unto God, right? And men should not dress up as women and wear women's clothes, and all these things are in the Bible, right? But our laws, at least for Singapore, came from the British and the Indian statutes, which actually the basis of their laws came from the Bible, right? Because you all know Britain was a Christian-ish, they were a Christian nation when they were colonizing the world, and so we have retained some of their laws here in Singapore. So now the gay lobby is basically saying that, oh, these things are outdated, and you should remove them. And so that's why we have laws against unnatural sex, and that's why they are trying their hardest to get us to decriminalize this. But why can we not allow it, right? Because the moment you allow laws against the decriminalization of laws against unnatural sex, what's going to happen next? They are going to push for civil unions and same-sex marriage laws, because once there's nothing stopping them from pushing for marriage after that, after you say that their sex is morally equivalent to married people's sex, right? They will push for anti-discrimination laws in the workplace. So in places like the UK and the US, they have these things called the Equality Act, where you sorry yeah, okay, so they have these things called anti-discrimination laws, where you are not allowed to treat people differently based on their sexual orientation. Okay, and then we have things like hate crime laws. This is where it impinges on religious freedoms. So in some countries, you are not, if you tell somebody that I believe homosexuality is a sin, you might be prosecuted for a hate crime, right? And slowly it will lead to outlawing of Christianity. So there are many things. In the US, there are people who their parents who have wanted to pull their children out of a primary school or primary school class, because the school is actually teaching children about about LGBT things, at primary school age, and he said, I don't want my child to be subject to this. Basically, he was thrown into jail, right? Long story short, he was thrown into jail. Loss of religious freedom and cultural tyranny. This is happening in the US. Now, if you say anything that is remotely in support of traditional marriage, you are like the world's biggest pariah sinner. You know, spiritually, it leads to apostasy and persecution of the church. As I mentioned, there are many Christians in the US and the UK that are actually being persecuted for their beliefs. Many of them have been taken to court and forced to pay damages to homosexual couples because they refuse to bake them cakes for their weddings or things like that, right? Morally, it results in confusion, relativism, and incoherence. Basically, they do not believe that there is the biblical stand. There's a very clear logic towards why God says that only marriage and traditional families are the is morally superior to all these other types of sexual activity, right? There's a clear underlying reason for all of this, and if you want, we can go into that in more detail in one of the other sessions, right? But breaking down this barrier brings a lot of confusion, right? Can you imagine, if a child at 3 or 4 years old is being told like, oh, can you decide how do you feel like a girl or a boy today, right? This is literally happening in the world right now, right? Where they are just confusing children about their gender, and in the guy under the guise of being open-minded, right? And socially they are pushing for people to uh, reflect LGBT sensitivity. Okay, if you think this is far-fetched, I just want to share that in Singapore, in one of our universities, Yale NUS, when students go and stay in the dorms, they have this thing called, I think it's diversity training. So they will actually tell you that, you need to address people by their preferred gender pronouns. So for example, if I'm a girl, but I feel like I'm a boy today, you have to call me a he. Right? So that is the kind of thing that's happening. And this is not just in universities, it's happening in companies, it's happening in government, even, in some pockets of the world. Yeah. So it's really becoming mad in that sense. Christophobia, people hating on Christians because of their beliefs, workers fired, um, yeah, and health implications, because of rampant sex and all that, HIV and AIDS on the rise. They will hate me for saying that, but yes. So homosexuality and same-sex marriage. What is the biblical worldview then? The biblical worldview is very, very different, right? It says that man is created in the image of God. Marriage is between one man and one woman for life. God has given us the power to overcome sin. Sinners will be judged, and homosexual activity is an abomination unto God. Right. So that, like I said, there's very clear understanding in there's a very clear reason, right, for why this is so. And in the Bible, we can go into it, but one reason is because family is the stable and building block of society. It is the only institution in the world that will connect a child to his father and to his mother biologically. Yeah. Uh, it will connect a biological child to his biological parents in one unit, right? So that is if that is one reason why family is so important, right? Because children need both a father and a mother, and the only institution that will allow him to be connected to his biological parents is the traditional family unit. Any other unit, you either need a sperm or an egg from someone else, and that can be confusing to the child, right? And parents also are supposed to teach children in the way of the Lord, so they will grow up to be functioning and contributing members of society, right? It's not just about fulfilling your own happiness, right? So this is a very, very complex topic. It's very, yeah, we'll probably need another session, a few other sessions maybe to go into this. fully. But
Okay,
anyway, let me just.
Cherissa, right now, if you can just hold back on your summary. I know you're coming right to the end of it, but we're going to have some of the pastors to give some comments and some questions from the floor. But before that, I am wanting to see whether or not we can actually give a greetings. I would like, let me see if I can get Stephanie, my daughter, on the line here. Stephanie, can you open up your window so that I can see where you are? If you are on the line, I think she wants to give a greetings to Binobagan Church. Let me see if she is on the line there. Yeah, she's there. Okay. Go ahead, Stephanie. We're going to spotlight you now and just give a greeting to. I know you just woke up.
Can you hear me?
I know you just woke up. You're staying up late last night with your parents watching shows.
Yeah, we were having family movie night. Yeah.
Would you like to say hello to Esther Grace and to Joy Joy and to
I
Binobagan?
can't see y'all because of the shared screen, so I have to
Okay,
share.
we're just going. Yeah. Okay, is that better?
Okay, yeah.
Or maybe
Thank you. Thank
we
you.
can just spotlight on to the. There's Esther Grace. Give a wave to
Hello.
Stephanie, everybody.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Fine. We're fine.
Hi, wow. There's so many of you. It's amazing how we all can connect on Zoom. Yeah. And yeah, everyone is staying at home, you know, trying to be safe and staying with their family. I think that's great. And I miss you guys.
Okay, so if anybody has some, let's go over to some questions now. I know that Cherissa is just going to be answering some of these questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Hopefully we can plan or strategize something to reach out to the young people. For those of you who are outside Philippines, you may not know, but over 50%. I think Mom Rita can probably give us the statistics on this. I'm pretty backdated on this. Mom Rita in Capiz, in Iloilo. She's the director and principal of Capiz National High School. But as I understand it, I think over nearly half the population of Philippines are under 16, or there's a large percentage of the young people in Philippines that are children. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. And I know you have 6,000 students under your charge. Yeah. So let us know what is the situation that you're facing in Philippines as far as the topics that have been discussed so far. Do you have any comments in terms of humanism, in terms of any of the issues that have been brought up, in terms of evolution, creation debate, or homosexuality, same-sex marriages, or attractions, or indeed abortion, or any of those issues? I know you mentioned last time about the suicide rates going down in your area, principally due to gospel work and also principally due to Bible studies and so on and so forth.
Me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. I think
Okay,
we were having, your video went down, but go ahead, we can still hear you. Okay, I think we'll come back to Mom Rita later. And any of the other pastors that you have a question or a comment, let's go over to Pastor Lazarus over there in Pakistan. Yes, go ahead. One more time, unmute yourself, sir. You have to unmute yourself, sir. Hang on. Huh? On your side, Pastor, you have to unmute yourself first before we can hear what you're saying.
Okay, now everybody hear me?
Yes, that's right. Perfect. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I want to catch you since 3 week, fourth week. My friend Dr. Juliet from Philippines, she gave me your IDs. So first of all, I'm thank to Dr. Juliet, God, and you all. So I'm very happy to feel joy to finding myself among you. And second, I am very agreed, and this is new teaching for me because in Pakistan we struggle in different things, and especially here in Chitral. So I am very, very happy, and I thought this all teaching need my all youth students. They belong to our class tribes. That is 2 hours from my district Chitral. 2 hour travels are very narrow mountains roads. So as lockdown finish, I hope if you continue your study, you will find them here in front of you. So I am very impressed through that studies. This is very unique for me and for my church and for our children in Pakistan. Love you. Thank you very much. You explain in very good ways.
Excellent. And we're so glad to have a common language that we can communicate with you. How many people in Pakistan, sir, and how many people in your area that you are ministering to?
Okay. Actually, I belong to Lahore. My birth is in Lahore, but God called me to this area in Chitral. In all Pakistan, 2.3 or 3 point Christians population in Pakistan. And in Chitral, we have only 35 family in Chitrals. So uh, we have in church 15 families in our church, and other people sector in other in mountains areas in different places. But in districts, we have 15 families. You can say in a small church with 40 peoples or 50 peoples. So, and my specific goal is uh, target to unreached groups in Chitral. In Chitrala, four unreached group. So in 10 years, I only reaching a one group, a class group. So we discipling them, and many of them they grown up and they can share a word of God. Our one girl, she sharing the testimony, she sharing gospel with friends in valleys, in their tribes, and she also running a Sunday school among 12 three children, uh, a Gentiles girls. She's still in her second years, but we disciple in home. We have two homes here, boys' homes and girls' homes. So we have three more group we have to target near to Afghanistan. Our home is near to Afghanistan, only 1 hour travels. So by jeep. So Nuristani, Wakhi is near to Tajikistan. Pakistan and Afghanistan corridor near to Tajikistan, Wakhan peoples. And third group is Khwar, Chitrali peoples. They are fundamental Muslims. So they are our third group we have to reach. We daily reach them through character evangelism, through gospel evangelism, in different way we are evangelizing them. So this is my job, I am doing this. So I need much these studies.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Pastor Lazarus. We in speaking on behalf of Mods TV here in Singapore and Philippines, we are very interested in any churches along the Silk Route, the so-called Silk Route, which stretches from China back to the Holy Land. So Pakistan is right on spot, on target there. So whatever we can do to get intellectual property like this to your young people and to your millennials, as we say, they are not the future stakeholders, they are the stakeholders of the future. And so can you imagine that if we can connect churches like the one that you see there in Binobagan in Negros over to Pakistan, maybe I can, Esther Grace and the youth of Binobagan, you can have a prayer project and pray for Pakistan. How about that? Huh? Ask your pastor, Pastor Spy, for permission. If you can maybe twin yourself with the Pakistani church on the Silk Route. The Silk Route is the proverbial connectivity, the route of connectivity from, in the olden days, they used to travel by camels from like Marco Polo going to China, and from Chinese, all the Chinese silk going backwards to Italy, and, noodles and macaroni and that kind of thing. It was a trade route, but it's also symbolic of a prayer concern that we have in Mods TV for the Silk Route and the Spice Route. These are both overland routes as well as maritime routes that go around India and up through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean and so on and so forth. So there's multiple ways that the East can get to the West and the West can get to the East as far as the continent of China and Europe, that sort of a thing. So we definitely, Pastor Lazarus, we thank you very much for your input and giving us a little bit more information. Please stay in touch with us and write to us at the email that we've given. Write to my wife, Reverend Lien, for the free training material as well. And we need to stay in touch and to give you the times and the schedules for our programming as well. Please stay in touch with us.
Thank you very
more
much.
information at 7modalities.com. Okay, now let's go over to, we have some other comments from Mike. Is Michael Nariasu ready? Go ahead and unmute yourself, and then if there's any comments from Michael. Okay. If not, let's go over to Mom Rita again. Let's see if
Okay.
Rita is ready.
Okay, can you hear me now, Pastor?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
And we can.
Again, I'm sorry, I was disconnected, but I'm sure that I'm in, in the shade now because I have just my left eye pterygium scraped the other day. So my
what
eyes.
happened? What happened to your eye, Mom Rita?
I had a pterygium scraped so that I could see better, and I would not feel that hurts whenever I read the documents. Every day I read documents and sign papers, so it hurts,
Okay.
no? But now it's doing well. So go back, and I have noticed also that from I was not so present in many times these past days because I'd like to connect what to this what we are doing now. I am doing now with the speaker we have, because we have really to double time at this time. Could not attend some previous during this previous days because we have activated so many groups online also, Pastor Gerard, and that's a blessing, no?
Praise
And
the Lord.
the latest was we have our WIRAC, that we have our WIRAC students, composed of students coming from different Christian groups and Catholics also. I think majority even are Catholics that we are activating, and even online we are conducting some prayer meetings through online and also sharings. But we have now just activated one group also that is coming from our leaders in Capiz National High School, that our Supreme Student Government. We have activated a group online, and then we are we are bringing this kind of spiritual nourishment, no, together with Ma'am Gigi and Pastor Luel Abadjano, and we are starting sharing with them what we are having with the other group. And it's nice because the president is a Catholic, devout Catholic, but very open, kind of a lady student, in order to embrace this kind of faith revival that we have, a renewal, because and I would like to really inject and grab this opportunity that the Catholic Church now is opening its connection to the other church group, because we really have to do these things fast and actively. So aside from that, no, I am also having different kinds of Catholic and other groups having this online training. So because that's true with because I could really see, the needs, so many needs for our young people to be redirected, with what our good speaker really laid to us a while ago, and discussed with us that amidst anyway, ever since the beginning of the history of mankind, it's always like that. People would sin, then would again go back to God, and then the love of God would be overflowing to the mankind, and then God would redeem again. But still, people as a kind of going back again to sin, to doing sin, to committing sin. But then somehow in generations and era, the sin and the immoralities of mankind just take form in different form, But then we also notice that the course of nature, that is the course of God, through nature, would really from time to time would also stop or balance or regulate those intellectual activities and other immoral activities and other worldly activities of people that tend to curse out of those intellect and knowledge that you have. If it is not blessed by God, if they are not blessed by God, it would not be redeemed by God, it would bring curse to humanity. But if this product of intelligence of mankind, and it's if it is morally upright, done morally upright, and for the service of humanity, it would bring blessings to the whole of humanity. So it is with our young generations now, because it is true that they are faced with this, especially these modern technologies, that I've learned from you that the homes are becoming now fatherless, because the father now is acting a father, are their gadgets and televisions and the social media. And that is what prompted me to really embrace and to open our school, not only to Catholic trainings, but I kept on inviting them also, because Catholics, maybe they're just concerned. It's good that there was this renewal movement in the Catholics, especially in the Philippines during 1980s, and we had this charismatic renewal movement, this born again renewal movement, and even the Couples for Christ, renewal movement that helped the church in order to energize, and to make a beautiful and exciting, the exercise or the experience of the God, in the lives of many people here. But of course, priests are concerned only with the rituals, the rites, the rituals, because they are just confined. And there's one, because of this renewal movement, I think the church people, especially in the Catholic, the priests are getting to recognize also and appreciate the fruits of this renewal movements, and they are getting to recognize that this should really somehow stoop down, and merge and mingle with people, just like Jesus Christ did, because somehow that they are, I don't know if they're just conscious of their position, that they are the priest and they are just a kind of aloft to the people, but that should not be. So go back to this now realities, that are affecting, adversely impacting the lives of our young people, with this homosexuality and abortions, and say, yeah, it's true. All those things are also real in our place here, but of course, this is not Capiz is quite a laid-back city, and I think, and even the crime rate is minimal. It's minimal, and even the COVID case now. So praise God for us. We just have the 2 dead, but then there is no local transmission, and we have only this OFW. We have only these 2 cases of COVID now in our province, brought by the positive OFW individual who can just went home to our place. But aside from that, no, we don't have any cases. And life is so beautiful, and life seems normal, unlike in the places in Cebu and in Manila that the cases are rising. But so it's my heart and my mind that I really should do something for these young people. And thanks be to God that He has allowed me to be courageous enough, maybe because of my birthright, the prowess to me that I'm not afraid to really experiment or do something if I see there is a need, especially if I have already tuned in my spirit to God because of my experience in the renewal movements in the Catholic Church. That's why I don't care if a lot of people will say that I am a devout Catholic, but I have now so many friends in different kinds of churches because that is the need of time, no? Because I think I'm only answerable to God. I'm not answerable I don't care what other people say, but I am a mother, especially because I am a mother of 6. I really feel the condition now of the family, how it is being troubled, caused by this social media and the modernization and the fatherless situation in the home. So it is my responsibility. I think it's my responsibility if I can do it, and I can do it. No, if others cannot, I can do it because God has given me that inspiration and that courage to do it, because as long as I am alive, I have to do something, for the good of these young people, because I am a mother. So as of now, we are trying really to expand, to expand, not the businesses, but to expand the connection and to reach out to many young people in order to form groups. And even we have proven that COVID cannot stop our goal of evangelizing people. In fact, I think we are spreading even throughout in another way, in a very exciting and interesting manner, through this online, and reaching out to many people, and especially to our young people here in the Capiz. So that's it.
Okay, thank you
Pastor.
very much, Mom Rita, and the principal of Capiz National High School in the island of Panay, and she's in charge of 6,000 young people. Many pastors have also joined in, as well as
And
Youth Revolution.
Pastor, and because of this online, because we cannot have a face-to-face mode of teaching, now it's even increasing. Our enrollment is increasing.
Wow.
And many private schools are many of their students are transferring to our school.
Wow.
So wow, that's really, I couldn't believe it, because
Yeah,
of
and
course,
hallelujah, hallelujah, Mom Rita.
yeah.
That is such good news. You're a public servant, and you're a servant. Thank you for your service in the kingdom of God. And we want to assure you that we work with all denominations, and you are my favorite Catholic after the Pope himself. I mean, the Pope is my favorite, but then after that, you're my second favorite Catholic in all the world.
Thank you.
And
And
just to let you know that, in
that
1
inspires
Corinthians
me.
8, verse 6, and we're going to close with this benediction from 1 Corinthians 8, verse 6 in just a moment. And that gives the basis for Christian unity. There was no such thing as Catholic or Protestant or whatever,
Yeah.
Anglican or Baptist. In the time of Jesus, there was either you were for him or you were against him. That's it. And it was very clear, and I'll show you in the creedal statement in 1 Corinthians 8, verse 6 there. But before that, there may be some other issues that perhaps Cherissa can. Now, did Ruben want to chip in on this at this point? You want to unmute yourself? keep your seatbelt on, and I hope you're not driving right now.
No, I stop at the sidewalk. Anyway, cutting short with my introduction. Uh, I don't know if you already mentioned, or one of the speakers already mentioned in the past sessions about the uh, uh, what we call a space app. I think it's being used more in at Facebook. Space app is an application that the user can transform his appearance, or the girl or the boy's appearance, from being a boy to a girl, or from a girl to a man. I'm just concerned. I'm just raising a voice. I know every listener to this meeting is mature enough to digest what I'm trying to say, because many young people, many even young adults right now are using that. They make themselves as looking attractive if they are of the opposite gender. But I'm concerned because it conditions the mind of the younger generation. Uh, in the long run, they may not be thinking that some are already confused in their gender. And if they see themselves in another appearance or another gender, it may make them more confused. It may make them live harder in the future. It's because especially here in our country, I can understand in other nations that may not be a concern, but here in our country, it's a growing. It's really becoming very popular to the younger generation. So my concern is just we the parents, the pastors, the older generation must not distance ourselves from getting more updated or informed of the things that the younger generation are using nowadays, uh, so that we can be of better guidance to them, not to be very strict, if I may say it that way, but to be of better guidance so that the younger generation can be wiser uh, in their way of living, in the things that they are accepting in their lives. That's all. I know that
Okay, thank you very
time is
much, Pastor Ruben. I
already
don't know whether
consumed.
Cherissa wanted to
Uh,
comment on that, or have any other comments. If you have a question, please type it in. We still have 1 or 2 minutes left. Go ahead, Cherissa.
Yeah, I think the use of the face app now is definitely normalizing. It could go towards normalizing transgenderism. Yeah, because it's making it easy for a boy to appear, see how he looks as a girl, or a girl see how he looks as a boy, and to tell people that, you know what, it's okay, whether you're a boy or a girl, it's up to you. Yeah, but I think the deeper issue for me personally for for this is also the technology behind it, the AI technology. Yeah, and also the usage of, so this is an app, right? So the usage of smartphones have definitely increased. As we all know, the smartphones, mainly the most popular smartphone is Apple, and Apple is very pro LGBT, QIA, whatever it is not. Um, a lot of other filter apps and all these things on Instagram. Instagram is bought by Facebook, which is also very pro LGBT. So all these big companies in the world all have an agenda, right? So um, but for me, the issue, as I mentioned just now, is really the data that it's collecting. Is another big conversation that we probably need to have. Yeah, because I don't know. I just did a quick Google just now as you were talking, and I think there are some privacy concerns about the Face app, because when you upload your image into the app, the app actually takes this image and it stores it in their whatever it is that they're storing it in, and I think that's a concern, because they can use this image for whatever it is that they want to use. Yeah, if their privacy settings are not good. Yeah, so there are many things that are out there that look very innocent, but they have very deep but culturally they are very dangerous. So you're right that we need to be careful and to educate our youth. I think it's very difficult to be a parent today. Yeah, it's very hard to even tell your children don't use this, don't use that. But I think you're right, we really need to educate them and to help them make better choices.
Okay, do we have a question from Luz Viminda Saison? You have your hand up. Okay, all right. If not, then we have a question from Suzette Gonzalvo. Why is it homosexuality are growing faster? Cherissa, homosexuality. I think we may have to have a whole section on this. Actually, how do you propose we do that? Or how do you want to answer that question?
I actually don't know if this is an issue with the other countries. Yeah, it's certainly an issue in Singapore, but I don't know if it's an issue in the Philippines, for example, or other countries. Yeah. So, but if you're interested in understanding more about this whole LGBT agenda thing, yeah, because I think even if it's not an issue in your country, you will read about it in the news, right? You will, because it's happening in the US and the UK. Yeah, and I guess just a short answer as to why it's increasing. I think the culture has been primed to accept something like that for a long time. Yeah. Actually, honestly speaking, when I reviewed my slides, humanism is actually quite outdated. I think what's happening in the world today has gone further than that already. Yeah, it's becoming more violent. It's becoming radical. It's becoming intolerant. It's not even about. It's not even trying to hide that it is. Uh, it's not even trying to hide that it's a anti-religious force anymore. They're just outrightly going out and targeting Christians and targeting Muslims and people who don't believe in what they believe. Yeah, so I think the education system in the West and all education systems that follow the West have have been primed to accept this philosophy for a long time. Yeah, it started, I mean, when we were young in the sexual when we were younger, the issue was dating non-Christians, right? When I was a kid, the issue was dating non-Christians. Like the church was trying to tell people, should you or should you not date non-Christians? So now it has gone all the way. It has gone so far from that now. Yeah, so I don't know. I think darkness is increasing. Christ is coming back. The enemy knows his time is short, so he is attacking the church and God's people on every front he can get. Yeah.
Well, it really does seem that time is against us once again. And we have so many different comments here. Franklin from South Africa mentioned about political correctness. Very interesting indeed. And lots of thoughts and ideas behind that. I would love to hear and get, once your audio is fixed, to get your update from South Africa and what's happening in Africa as well. Pauline mentioned about parenting, and we're going to have a whole series on fatherless. And so we do invite all the men folk. It's going to be for dads for life, a kind of training with Cassie Karsten from South Africa as well. In August, is that right? In August? Okay. So lots of programs coming in. If you like this program, please catch it on the replay or share it with other people. I'd like to thank Cherissa and Ramu, who are now neighbors with us just down the road at Lorong. What number are you? I think 40, is it? Or 40, yeah. Okay, and thank them for her time, for her effort, her energy, and also for her willingness to perhaps be part of a spearhead team to champion the Christian values among the churches where our associates are active. And we can see a whole big sphere of influence, especially not only in Singapore, not only in Philippines, but also westward. As we go towards South Africa, you connect the dots from Manila to Singapore to Cape Town to Pakistan, Lahore, where Pastor Lazarus is. That's really what we call the Silk Route. And so we really need to pay attention and, to how we can properly manage and operationalize modalities. As you can see there, Mom Rita, not just having to leave her hometown, but her church, rather her high school, her national high school is growing. There are lots of private enterprises and private educational organizations that are wanting to come under her covering and her umbrella. And of course, as long as she remains under the umbrella of God, then praise the Lord. That is where she is not only protected, but she can make an impact using her modality as a proistemy. You can see proistemies, and I think also Cherissa as well, having that proistemic, approach. You're quite forceful in, even in your deportment in terms of getting ideas across and making sure and ensuring. Of course, those of you who you may not know who Cherissa is or her background, she's a lawyer. She's also married to a lawyer, Ramu Nachiappan. And so it's an amazing, the way that God is working and bringing us all together, the family of God. We want to be here for you, and we want to be giving a platform for these ideas where Jesus Christ is in the center of it all. And I think also we have to also recognize, yes, as Raphael says, that we are really standing on the shoulders of the giants, those who have passed on. It is a shift. It is a shift, a change from the previous revivals to the present revival. And, we want to, we see that as what Jesus said, occupy until I come. And we have a great long 2,000-year, 5,000-year history going back to the, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all the way back from Moses to Jesus to Paul to Calvin to Luther to, Wales, Azusa Street, all the way to all the denominational and denominal movements and, mega churches, house churches, marketplace ministries, to where we are here on Zoom. So we're in a long succession of what God is doing. This is what God is doing in our day, and God's work done in His way will never lack God's supply. So we remind ourselves once again. I want to show you the basis for Christian unity as Mods TV grows, as we go to a more global audience. What are the basic tenets? And there really is only one. And if you take a look, for example, at 1 Corinthians 8, verse 6, you can actually see what that basis of unity really is. Okay, so let's just take a look at this. And this is the Christian Shema written by Apostle Paul. Alehumin eis theos hapater. Yet for us there is but one God, the Father, ex ou ta panta kai hemes eis auton, from whom all things came and for whom we live. Kai eis kurios Jesus Christus dia ou ta panta. But one Lord, there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came, kai hemes diauto, and through whom we live. So as long as we are anchored on the revelation that is really Hebraic in nature, right? This one God idea. And then after that, his son, Jesus Christ, we are on very solid ground and not sinking sand. And we can then relate to across the different traditions and faiths, and we can share this vision of the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And once from there, from that position of strength, from that rock, then of course Jesus will build his church across the generations in our succession planning, as well as the gospel goes to the uttermost parts of the earth. So we really want to end this session. God bless one and all. Let's remember the words of Apostle Paul to the Philippian jailer who was really, unaware. He was unshaven. He was he was really not aware of his situation at that time of the earthquake. And Apostle Paul called out in the darkness, in the rubble of that prison cell in Philippi, do thyself no harm, for we are all here. That's really important for us to get this message across to all of the young people, the millennials, all of those who are the stakeholders in our future. Do thyself no harm, for we are all here.